How you doing, guys? Well, it's been a crazy couple of days, and it looks like I'm wearing lipstick. It's because I've had chili and chili pasta, and it won't come off. So I promise you, I'm not wearing lipstick. Um, but if I wanted to wear lipstick, that would be fine too. Anyway, ADHD brain. So the internet is pretty filled with the Charlie Kirk thing and the Ukrainian girl Iryna Zarutski, something like this. We've all seen what's happened with both of these people, right? And the thing that's annoying is the stories that are now coming out and the way it's been spun. So the amount of conspiracy theories that are coming out with this Charlie Kirk bloke, and people were hand signaling in the background, and how did he change his ring, and just so much nonsense around the situation is doing my head in. And then the Irina situation, it's just immediately become a racial thing. How could it not? Um, I've been getting a lot of messages about the Irina situation personally because people have been saying, what could she have done? Is there any kind of self defense that you could have done? So I'll talk about the things that I've been getting messages about, and then I'll say my piece, okay? And then I will give you the advice that I think is appropriate to both situations. Yeah. So the number one thing that we can learn from it. Firstly, there was two murders in the last 36 hours in America. Yeah. There's approximately 62 homicides per day in the US. So it is not a new thing in America. It's just this was quite unique in the situation. They were broadcasted, or the CCTV was pretty vicious. The nature of it, the details of it were prolific. So we'll talk about the Irina situation. Could she have done anything in terms of self-defense? No, there's nothing she could have done. I mean, I teach awareness, and I teach people that in situations like public transport where you don't know anybody, you shouldn't be turning your back to them. So you can argue that she could have had her back to the window, so she had a peripheral view of the train or the bus, whatever she was on, but it wouldn't have mattered because she had this big, strong, grown man wailing down overhand attacks with a knife. So whatever she tried to do, he would have achieved his outcome. So she was definitely not going to survive that interaction one way, shape, or form. I can't say anything about the Charlie Kirk thing. It was a radical assassination. The guy, he's out there debating people that aren't always of the most sound mindset. He's got some pretty radical views, and it's inevitable that he's going to piss a lot of people off. And it's America, and they love to shoot people over there. So there's no conspiracy. There's no the government did this and it's an anti-Trump thing. This is just some crazy bloke that pulled the trigger, and that was all that happened there. Okay, so and with the Ukrainian woman, she again, it was another crazed bloke. It's just another maniac. Like I said, 62 homicides per day in the USA, and that's not including all the attempted homicides, right? So what can we learn from it? What is the lesson, the takeaway? There is one big takeaway from both of the situations, okay? And that is the medical assessment, or the medical reactions were, I don't think, very good. They both bled to death from what seemed like carotid artery or an arterial bleed out. Hence why it was so very quick. Yeah. And where the attack happened. Okay. Charlie, the way that his body went, potentially that bullet could have gone into the spine in some way, causing that sort of cerebral reaction. But the reality is, we know that was an arterial bleed. Yeah. The problem with arterial bleeds is they're very, and I'm telling you this from a medical, from as a medic, I'm telling you my experience, my training, and what we understand about arterial bleeds. They're high pressure. It's a high pressure blood transfer of the body. Okay, so if you've got a vein, it's still quite a lot of pressure. It's going to pour a lot of blood, but an artery is going to squirt because it's the highest pressure type of blood transfer in the body. Yeah, if you were to imagine the furthest away from your heart you get, okay, the lower the pressure, except for the femoral artery, because it needs a lot of pressure to get down to those legs. Okay, so if you were to cut your wrist or to cut the brachial artery, you would find that you're still going to bleed, potentially bleed to death, but it's a slower rate and it's a lot easier to stop. Something like a carotid artery bleed out in here, it's super high. It's one of the highest rates you could bleed out. You could lose half your blood in around 1 minute, and that's excluding other factors like adrenaline and fear and how big the hole was, etc. So you got to think how quickly you can go unconscious and death occur. Now, the problem you'll find a lot of people that have arterial bleeds is, for example, if I was to cut my brachial artery now and it was to start squirting blood, the instinct would be to do this, wouldn't it? Okay, so when you put your hand over an arterial bleed like this, it doesn't do anything really. The blood just pours from underneath your hand. It's too high pressure. So we have to do something called direct pressure, which means you've got to try and pinpoint the actual artery and apply pressure to the artery itself. Now, sometimes you might find that the artery under pressure or under the tension, if it's snapped, it can retract, which is what we found a lot in Afghanistan with the femoral artery. It would if it got lacerated, it could ping straight back up into the body. So you have to try and get hold of it. You might have seen that scene in, what was it, Saving Private Ryan, when they're trying to get hold of the femoral artery to stop him bleeding to death. So in that scenario, what you can do is pack the wound. So you could tear your your clothes apart, bed sheets, whatever the hell you've got around you, you can rip them apart and stuff them into the wound, and then try and apply direct pressure that way. So when it comes to the neck, oh, by the way, just to go backwards, you've also got the ability to apply tourniquets on the limbs. We can't tourniquet the neck, but what you can do is you can get your fingers inside the neck to find the artery, or stuff the wound again. And I'm sorry that this is probably sounding quite gruesome, but we've all seen this footage with, all of the thing. So it is what it is, right? So you can stuff the wound and you can apply direct pressure here. The problem with Charlie is that the images that I seen, he was being carried away to a vehicle, and it's going to be almost impossible to keep that level of pressure you need on the artery whilst you're carrying him to a vehicle. The best thing, in my opinion, right, I'm not a doctor, I'm a medic, but I'm not a doctor. The best thing, in my opinion, would have been that they kept him at that location and applied as much pressure as they could and had paramedics arrive, and that could have been air ambulance. They could have brought plasma or blood with them, and then they could have tried that way. That's assuming that that bullet hadn't entered the spine or cerebral cortex or whatever that may have happened. We don't know yet, I don't think. With the Ukrainian girl, almost certainly immediate medical attention, plugging that wound, direct pressure could have saved her life. She's just, as you've seen, she just slumped to her death. As she slumped to unconsciousness, it doesn't mean you could have dragged her from that position and applied direct pressure, whether it meant going inside the wound and finding the artery or doing it from the outside. But that could have really saved her life. When I do all my knife training stuff, I use something called a pulse oximeter. So what that means is, because with the knife training that we do, it's assumed you're going to get cut. So what you can do is you can use a pulse oximeter to test that theory of direct pressure. So if you turn the pulse, this measures your pulse and your blood oxygen levels, okay? So if you put something like this on, the pulse oximeter will turn on and it will give you a reading. Now, right now, it's not giving a reading of anything. It's just straight lines, okay? So if I put it on my finger, I'll put it on my middle finger. It's starting to read. I don't know if you can see that. Starting to give a reading now. You see the little ziggies at the bottom there? Ziggies? Yeah. So what I can do now, I can try, see if I can stop those ziggy lines. And as you can see, I no longer have a pulse running through my arm. The reason I no longer have a pulse running through my arm, because I'm applying direct pressure to the brachial artery through the arm, where it runs alongside the bone. That direct pressure is going to stop me having an arterial bleed out. It's effective because it's direct, as opposed to trying to crush or squeeze the whole arm. So it's just a little bit of advice in terms of what I think is the only lesson to take away from it, because there's nothing either of those people could have done in that scenario, but the bystanders, they could have helped. I know this, the Ukrainian woman, it looks like nobody tried to help. I just don't think they knew what was going on. I think everything happened so quickly. My perspective, it wasn't some bloody racist thing. I think it was just, they didn't know what was happening. There wasn't any squirting blood. It seemed to have been coming down her clothes, right? And it was only and when she slumped, I don't think they still knew what the hell was going on, and it was only when they seen a lot of the blood and people start to react. So I don't know. Listen, that's just my take on it. Trying my best to dilute some of the nonsense that's going out there, and also give you a little bit of advice should you find yourself in that situation. So yeah, that's it, guys. I hope that's helped somebody. You never know, you might need to stop an arterial bleed out one day, and you might remember that guy. What did he say? Oh yeah, direct pressure. Direct pressure.